Hello everyone, it's Nitij here. Today we will talk about building serverless functions in Next.js. We are going to explore how to use both the traditional page router and the newer app router to create dynamic web applications using serverless functions. I will also talk about what kinds of runtimes are available with Next.js and what are the differences between them. And then I will also talk a little bit more about specifically these serverless functions. So let's get started and see how these functions can enhance your Next.js projects. So primarily there are three types of Next.js runtimes. The first one is Node.js, the second one is serverless, and third one is Edge. So with Node.js, the runtime is the standard environment for running server-side JavaScript. It is the most common runtime for backend functions in Next.js, offering full compatibility with the Node.js ecosystem. The default Node.js runtime is ideal for traditional server-side operations like handling API requests, interacting with databases, and executing any other common server-side logic. Next comes the serverless runtime. So the serverless runtime refers to the environment provided by serverless platforms like Vercel or AWS Lambda, where the functions are executed. It is optimized for short-lived operations and automatic scaling. This runtime is best suited for microservices, API routes, and other backend tasks that need to scale automatically with on-demand. The third one is the Edge runtime. So the Edge runtime is designed for running serverless functions at the edge of a network which is closer to the user. This runtime is optimal for tasks which require very low latency, such as manipulating HTTP requests and responses and personalized content delivery. Now this is a table which Next.js has provided to showcase the difference between the different functionalities between Node, serverless, and Edge runtimes. For example, the cold boot time of serverless is normal, but for Edge it's low. You can also check out the support provided for the NPM packages and the differences between serverless and Edge. So for instance, Edge runtime has only access to a smaller subset of NPM packages, but the serverless runtime has access to all of the NPM packages. Features like HTTP streaming, static rendering, and dynamic rendering, their availability can be checked out with this table. Okay, so now let's get back to the topic of this video, which is serverless functions in Next.js. As I have already mentioned, they are a way to write server-side logic that can be deployed as part of your Next.js application. The best part of serverless functions is that you don't need to worry about setting up your infrastructure based on your Node.js backend requirement. Serverless functions are hosted automatically whenever you deploy your Next.js application on Vercel. They also scale automatically based on demand, so you don't need to worry about occasional spikes in the traffic. The lifecycle of a serverless function typically includes initialization, when the function is invoked for the first time, its environment and dependencies are set up, then the execution, when the function runs its logic in response to an event such as an HTTP request, and then finally the termination. So after execution, the function may go idle until it's either called again or terminated by the serverless platform. Developing serverless functions locally in Next.js is straightforward. You can test these functions by running your Next.js local development server, and any changes you make to functions in the pages API directory in case of page routing are hot reloaded just like regular pages. So you just need to have the prerequisite of a Next.js application, then create a serverless function, and if you need to add utility files, then add them too, and then test your code locally, and finally configure your functions options, and then finally deploy your function with your application. And you can also configure your serverless functions by changing the settings for the region, the maximum duration, and the memory. I will now show you how you can create serverless functions in both page routing and the newer app routing. So to create a serverless function in the page routing, first you need to add a folder with the name pages if it's not already there. Now in pages, I'm gonna create another folder with the name API, and I will add a new folder within this API folder for our function. So I'm gonna name this folder as serverless. Now in this folder I will create a file with the name function.js. Now you can name this file anything you want based on your requirements. Now to implement the logic for the serverless function in the page routing, we just need to export a default function handler. So this can be done by simply writing export and then default and then function. The name of the function is handler, and this is going to accept the arguments for the request and response. Now to test the execution of this function, we can simply return with the response the incoming values for the body, the requests query, and also the cookies. I'm just going to write response dot status, which is going to be 200, and then we will return a JSON. With JSON we will return stuff like body, so request dot body, and then let's copy this 2 more times. So next one is going to be the query parameters, so request dot query, and then the cookies as well, so request dot cookies. Let's just save it, and now I'm going to run our Next.js app locally. So for that I will write npm run dev in the terminal. Let's open up this URL, localhost 3000. Now to be able to run our function, I'm just going to write in the URL API and then serverless and then function. Press enter. So this is the response which the function is providing. There was nothing in the body, so it's empty. There were no query parameters, so it's an empty object. For cookies, we are getting this object as a value which resembles the cookies which are sent along with the request to this function. Now let's see how we can implement a serverless function for the app routing. So for that I will create a new folder in the existing app folder, and the name is going to be API, and for the function name I'm just going to call it as serverless. Now make sure that the JS file that you create within this folder has the name root.js. Now in this root.js we need to first import the next response, so import next response from next server, and then we just simply need to export the function or our serverless function. So I'm going to export the function for the get request, so get, and then the request is going to be provided as an argument. Now again, similar to what we did in our page routing serverless function, I'm just going to return the response, so next response dot JSON, and the first object is going to be the JSON that is going to be returned with the response. So I'm gonna return the request body, so body is going to be request dot body, and then let's copy and paste this 2 more times. Now for query, we are going to fetch the query from request dot next URL dot path name, and for cookies we are going to get the cookies from request dot cookies dot get all function, and let's also provide the status as 200 to indicate that this is a successful response, so status 200. And now let's just save it and then open this functions URL for the app routing in our browser. So this is what the response looks like. The path for this function is going to be API serverless. You don't really need to write root after that because this is default. The body is null, the query is this one, API serverless, and these are the cookies. For more comprehensive details on serverless functions in Next.js, you can visit Vercel's serverless functions documentation. Explore the documentation for specific guides on using both the app router and the traditional page router with serverless functions. You can also check out how to configure your serverless functions for different features like runtime, region, duration, memory. So guys, I hope this tutorial was helpful and you are now more comfortable with using the Next.js serverless functions in your project. If you found this video informative, then please consider subscribing for more content like this. I'm Nitij and it's been a pleasure creating this tutorial for you guys. Happy coding, and I will see you in the next video.